The wind howls across the Norwegian fjords like the breath of ancient gods. Thunder rolls through valleys carved by ice and time. And standing at the edge of the world, where rock meets sky and sea meets storm, is a man whose name will echo through the ages. This is the story of Ragnar Lothbrok. This is the story of blood, betrayal, and the terrible price of immortality. The first thing you must understand about Ragnar is this: he was born in fire. The night of his birth, his village burned. Raiders from the east, men who wore the wolf's head and drank from the skulls of their enemies, came without warning. They killed his father. They took his mother. And they left the infant Ragnar screaming in the ashes, wrapped in his dead father's cloak, with nothing but rage and smoke filling his tiny lungs. The old woman who found him, Astrid the seer, claimed she saw it in his eyes even then. The gods had marked him, not for peace, not for happiness, but for glory. She raised him on stories of Valhalla, of warriors who died with swords in their hands and songs on their lips. She taught him that death was not the end. It was merely the doorway to something greater. And young Ragnar, orphaned and alone, clung to those stories like a drowning man clings to driftwood. He would become more than a man. He would become a legend. Ragnar was 16 when he killed his first man. It was during the raid on Kattegat's southern shore, where the Jarl's son, Harald, golden-haired, beloved, arrogant, led a band of young warriors to prove themselves. Harald had mocked Ragnar for weeks, called him the orphan boy, said he smelled of ash and failure. The other boys laughed. Ragnar said nothing. But when the battle came, when the arrows fell like deadly rain, and the enemy surged from the tree line with axes raised high, Ragnar did not hesitate. The clash of steel on steel rang out like church bells. The smell of blood, copper, and salt filled the air. Men screamed. Men died. And Ragnar moved through the chaos like a wolf through sheep, his sword, his father's sword, salvaged from the ruins, singing its terrible song. He saved Harald's life that day, twice. The first time, he took an axe meant for Harald's skull, the blade biting deep into his shield, sending splinters flying. The second time, he drove his blade through the throat of a man twice his size, a berserker whose eyes had gone white with battle fury, who had Harald pinned beneath him. The blood sprayed hot across Ragnar's face. He didn't flinch. When the battle ended, when the enemy lay scattered like broken dolls across the mud, Harald stood before Ragnar, chest heaving, covered in the gore of war. The golden boy looked at the orphan, and for the first time there was no mockery in his eyes. There was fear. "You fight like you have nothing to lose," Harald said, his voice barely above a whisper. Ragnar wiped the blood from his blade on a dead man's tunic. "I don't." From that day forward, Harald and Ragnar were inseparable. Brothers, some said. Rivals, others whispered. Both were true. 10 years passed. 10 years of raids, of blood, of growing reputation. Ragnar and Harald became the twin blades of Jarl Haraldsson's army, feared, respected, unstoppable. They plundered the coasts of Frisia, brought back silver and slaves, and grew rich on the spoils of war. But Ragnar wanted more. It was Astrid the seer who told him of Lindisfarne, a monastery across the western sea, she said, where monks kept treasures beyond imagination. Gold, jewels, relics blessed by their strange god, and they were undefended, these holy men. They believed their god would protect them. "Their god is weak," Ragnar said, his eyes gleaming with ambition. "Ours are strong." Harald was hesitant. "The western sea is treacherous. Many ships have been lost. Haraldsson forbids it." "Haraldsson is old," Ragnar replied. "Old men fear the unknown. We are young, we fear nothing." In secret, Ragnar built a new kind of ship, longer, faster, with a keel that could cut through ocean waves like a knife through flesh. He gathered men loyal to him, warriors hungry for glory. And one stormy night, while Jarl Haraldsson feasted in his hall, Ragnar and his crew slipped into the darkness. Harald went with him. Of course he did. Where Ragnar led, Harald followed, bound by honor and rivalry and something deeper, a need to prove he was not second best. The voyage was hell. Waves the size of mountains crashed over the ship. Thunder split the sky. Men vomited over the sides, prayed to gods who seemed deaf to their pleas. But Ragnar stood at the prow, arms spread wide, screaming into the storm with wild laughter. "You cannot kill me," he roared at the heavens. "The gods themselves are afraid of what I will become." When they reached Lindisfarne, dawn was breaking. The monastery sat peaceful on its rocky island, bells ringing softly across the morning mist. The monks were at prayer. They never stood a chance. Ragnar's men fell upon them like wolves. The screams of the holy men echoed off stone walls. Gold and silver were torn from altars. Jeweled crosses were ripped from the necks of the dying. And Ragnar, standing in the chapel amid the carnage, lifted a golden chalice to his lips and drank the communion wine. "Your God did not save you," he said to a dying monk who stared at him with uncomprehending eyes. "Perhaps you prayed to the wrong one." They returned to Norway as heroes, as legends. The treasure they brought back made even Jarl Haraldsson's eyes widen with greed. But it also made him jealous. Haraldsson threw a feast in their honor. Meat roasted over open fires. Mead flowed like rivers. Warriors sang songs of Ragnar's daring, of the raid that proved the western seas could be conquered. But Haraldsson sat on his high seat, his aged face dark with thought. His wife, Siggy, beautiful, cunning, 20 years younger than her husband, whispered in his ear throughout the night. Ragnar watched them, saw the way she gestured toward him, saw the way Haraldsson's jaw tightened. "She's poisoning him against you," Harald muttered, drunk on victory and mead. "I can see it." "Let her try," Ragnar replied. "I have done nothing wrong. I have brought him wealth and glory." "You have made him look weak," a voice said behind them. They turned. It was Floki, the shipbuilder, wild-eyed, strange, brilliant, who had helped Ragnar design the vessel that conquered the Western Sea. Floki was laughing, but his eyes held no humor. "You showed everyone that the old ways are dead," Floki continued. "That youth and ambition matter more than age and tradition. Haraldsson sees that, and it terrifies him." Ragnar's hand moved to the hilt of his sword. Then he should step aside. "Or kill you first." The attack came 3 nights later. Ragnar woke to the smell of smoke, to the sounds of his home burning. Men with torches surrounded his longhouse. And at their head stood Haraldsson's champion, a massive warrior named Sigvard, who wore a bear's pelt and carried an axe that had split 100 skulls. "Jarl Haraldsson has declared you outlaw," Sigvard roared, "for defying his orders and bringing shame to his house. Come out and face justice, Ragnar Lothbrok." Ragnar emerged from the flames, sword in hand, wife and children behind him. His face was calm, too calm. "Justice," Ragnar said softly, "or murder? Does it matter?" The answer was steel on steel, the clash of combat that woke the entire village. Ragnar fought with the fury of 10 men, his blade a blur in the firelight. Sigvard was strong, but Ragnar was faster, smarter, hungrier. The fight ended when Ragnar's sword found the gap in Sigvard's armor, sliding between ribs, puncturing lung. The champion fell to his knees, blood bubbling from his lips, eyes wide with disbelief. "Tell Haraldsson," Ragnar whispered, leaning close, "that I am coming for him." Sigvard died with those words in his ears. According to the ancient laws, Ragnar had the right to challenge Haraldsson for his title. Trial by combat. The gods would choose the victor. The entire village gathered in a circle, a ring of shields and torches, as snow began to fall from a gray sky. Haraldsson stood on one side, old but still strong, still dangerous, a warrior who had killed more men than Ragnar had years of life. On the other side stood Ragnar, younger, faster, burning with righteous fury. But between them there was a third figure. "Harald," Stop this madness, Harold pleaded, looking between his Jarl and his brother-in-arms. There must be another way. There is no other way, Haraldson said coldly. He defied me, he must die. Then you must kill me first, Harold said, his voice breaking, because I will not stand aside and watch you murder my friend. The words hung in the frozen air, the crowd gasped, even Ragnar looked shocked. Haraldsson's face twisted with rage and grief. You would betray your Jarl for him. I would stand with the man who saved my life, Harold replied. The man who changed the world while you cowered in your hall, afraid of shadows. It was the wrong thing to say. Haraldsson moved faster than anyone expected, his sword flashing toward Harold's heart. But Ragnar was faster still. He dove between them, his blade catching Haraldsson's, the impact sending shockwaves up both their arms. You want me? Ragnar snarled. Then face me. What followed was not a fight. It was a dance of death, beautiful and terrible. Haraldsson fought with the skill of a lifetime, every move precise, every strike calculated. But Ragnar fought with something else, with destiny, with rage, with the ghosts of his dead parents screaming in his blood. The duel lasted minutes but felt like hours. Steel rang against steel. Snow fell on blood-slicked ground. The crowd watched in awed silence as 2 generations of warriors fought for the future of their people. In the end, it was age that betrayed Haraldsson. His knee buckled just for a moment, just long enough. Ragnar's sword took him in the chest, driving deep, piercing the heart. The old Jarl fell to his knees, staring up at the young man who had defeated him. You will make a terrible king, he gasped, blood on his lips. I know, Ragnar replied quietly, but I will be their king. Haraldsson died in the snow, and Ragnar Lothbrok became Jarl. For 5 years, Ragnar ruled, and in those 5 years he transformed his people from raiders into an empire. He led fleets to England, to Francia, to the Mediterranean itself. He brought back wealth beyond measure. He built new ships, new alliances, new legends. His name became a prayer and a curse on the lips of his enemies. Harold stood at his side through it all, his most trusted warrior, his closest friend. Together they seemed unstoppable. But power changes men. Ragnar grew distant, obsessed with his legacy. He took a second wife, a Saxon princess named Aethelswith, to cement an alliance. His first wife, Lagertha, the shield maiden who had fought beside him, bled beside him, left him, taking their children north. Harold watched his friend becoming someone he didn't recognize, someone hungry for glory at any cost. You're losing yourself, Harold told him one night, as they stood on the cliffs overlooking the sea. I'm finding myself, Ragnar replied. Everything I've done has led to this. Can't you feel it? We're on the edge of something extraordinary. Or something terrible. Ragnar turned to look at his old friend, and Harold saw something in those eyes that chilled him. Madness, ambition, an emptiness that no amount of gold or glory could fill. You're afraid, Ragnar said softly. You've always been afraid. And you've always been reckless. One of us will die a legend, Ragnar said. The other will die forgotten. Choose. Harold walked away without another word. That was the last time they spoke as friends. Ragnar planned one last raid, the greatest of all. He would sail to Wessex with a small fleet, strike at the heart of the Saxon kingdom, and return with a treasure that would make all his previous conquests seem like children's games. But something was wrong. The preparations were too hasty, the planning too sloppy. Floki tried to warn him. The gods are silent, the shipbuilder said, his wild eyes filled with genuine fear. I've made offerings, I've prayed, and they do not answer. This voyage is cursed. The gods are always silent, Ragnar replied, until the moment they're not. What Ragnar didn't know, what no one knew, was that Harold had sent a message to the Saxon king. A warning, a betrayal. Not out of malice, not out of jealousy, but out of love. Harold was trying to save his friend from himself, even if it meant destroying their brotherhood forever. The Saxon king, Aelle, was waiting when Ragnar's fleet arrived, waiting with an army 10 times the size of Ragnar's raiding party. The battle was a slaughter. Ragnar's men fought like cornered wolves, but they were overwhelmed. One by one they fell. One by one they died with swords in their hands and prayers to Odin on their lips. Ragnar himself killed 20 men before they finally brought him down, not with steel, but with nets, like an animal. He struggled and raged and cursed them in his northern tongue until they beat him unconscious. When he woke, he was in chains. King Aelle had prepared something special for the legendary Ragnar Lothbrok. A pit, deep and dark, filled with serpents, dozens of them, hundreds, their scales gleaming in the torchlight, their tongues tasting the air with deadly patience. They dragged Ragnar to the edge. He was beaten, bloody, his armor stripped away. But when he looked down into that writhing mass of death, he laughed. "Is this your Christian mercy?" he called out to Aelle, who watched from a safe distance. "Your forgiveness?" "You are a heathen and a murderer," Aelle replied. "You deserve no mercy." "Then we are the same, you and I," Ragnar said, grinning through broken teeth. "Men who do terrible things and call them righteous." They pushed him, he fell, and the snakes swarmed. But Ragnar Lothbrok did not scream. As the venom burned through his veins, as the fangs tore his flesh, he sang. He sang the old songs, the ones Astrid had taught him as a child. Songs of Valhalla and heroes and the golden hall where warriors feast forever. His last words, witnessed by a Saxon monk who would later write them down, were these: "How the little pigs would grunt if they knew how the old boar suffers." He was speaking of his sons, and in that moment, dying in agony, he was smiling. Because Ragnar Lothbrok understood something his enemies did not. Death is not the end of a legend. It's the beginning. But here is what no one tells you. Here is the twist that changes everything. Harald's betrayal, the message to King Aelle, was discovered. Not by Ragnar's sons, not by his warriors, but by Siggi, Haraldsson's widow, who had become one of Ragnar's advisors after her husband's death. She was the one who found the sealed letter in Harald's chambers. She was the one who read the words that would doom him. And she was the one who made a choice. She burned the letter. She told no one. Why? Because Siggi understood what few others did. Harald hadn't betrayed Ragnar out of jealousy or ambition. He had tried to save him. He had loved his friend so much that he was willing to become the villain of history to prevent Ragnar from throwing his life away on one last, pointless gesture of defiance. Harald's betrayal was the most loyal act of friendship anyone could give. When news of Ragnar's death reached Norway, Harald did not defend himself. He did not explain. He stood silent as Ragnar's sons, Bjorn, Ivar, Hvitserk, Sigurd, swore vengeance against all who had betrayed their father. He stood silent as they named him traitor. He stood silent as they challenged him to single combat. And on the beach where he and Ragnar had once stood as brothers, where they had laughed and fought and dreamed of conquest, Harald faced Ivar the Boneless with a sword in his hand and tears on his face. "I loved your father," Harald said quietly as the waves crashed behind them, "more than you will ever know." "Then you can die with his name on your lips," Ivar replied, cold as winter. The duel was brief. Harald did not fight back. He raised his sword once, twice, only to defend himself. And when Ivar's blade finally found his heart, he fell to his knees, looked up at the gray sky and smiled. "Forgive me, old friend," he whispered. "I tried." He died there on the sand, with the sea wind in his hair and Ragnar's name on his lips. It was only years later, when Siggi was dying, that she told Bjorn the truth. She showed him the ashes of the letter she had burned. She explained what Harald had tried to do. Bjorn wept. He wept for his father, he wept for Harald, and he wept for the terrible price of glory. Ragnar's greatest battle was never Lindisfarne. It was never the duel with Haraldson. It was never even the snake pit. His greatest battle was the one he fought inside himself. The battle between the man who wanted to be remembered and the man who wanted to be loved. Between ambition and friendship. Between legend and humanity. He chose legend, and it cost him everything. Harald chose love, and history named him traitor. But in the end, they both won. Because their story, this story of brotherhood and betrayal, of glory and sacrifice, lived on. It inspired Ragnar's sons to launch the great heathen army, to conquer kingdoms, to change the world. And somewhere in Valhalla, if such a place exists, perhaps Ragnar and Harald sit together at Odin's table, drinking mead from golden horns, laughing about the terrible things they did and the beautiful thing they were. Friends. The path to legend is walked alone, but the path to immortality is paved with the names of those who loved you. This is the story of Ragnar Lothbrok. This is the story of Harald the Loyal. And this is the truth that history forgot. The greatest warriors are not those who never fall. They are those who die for something greater than themselves. Even if the world never understands why. Skal.